Here's a revised version of the content with grammatical and punctuation errors fixed, proper paragraph separation, expletives replaced, and acronyms initials expanded. Story 1. Restrictions in my area have become quite relaxed, so I decided to take my dog to the dog park for the first time in about 7 months. I was walking around, and he would follow me, playing with other dogs if they got close. We were there for about 20 minutes when a man and his daughter walked by, coming the way I was going with their dog. They stopped when our dog started playing. His daughter began petting my dog and talking to him, which I normally wouldn't have a problem with, but given the current global health situation, no one should be touching other people's dogs. However, I wanted to be nice, so I let her play with him for a minute. I started walking, and my dog followed me. I thought that was it. When we crossed paths again, the father said that his daughter really liked my dog. I said, "Thanks, a lot of people do," then kept walking. He said she wanted him. We started having a back and forth argument about why he couldn't have my dog. Once people started watching, he gave up and started walking again. His daughter cried the entire rest of the time they were there. When I was ready to leave, I realized that his car was the first one by the exit. His daughter was waiting in the back seat, and he was standing outside holding scissors. It could have just been me overreacting, but I thought he was going to try to cut my dog's leash and get him in his car, so when I went to leave, I carried him. Looking at him, you'd probably guess my dog weighed around 60-70 pounds, but he's over 100, so if you were to pick him up, you'd be surprised at how heavy he is. When I walked out carrying him, I walked past his car and thought it was over. He came behind me and kicked the back of my knee as I was putting my dog in my car. I fell, and he tried to pick up my dog. Thankfully, because of how heavy he is, the foolish man dropped him in the middle of the parking lot. Don't worry, he's fine. I put him in my car and locked it before helping the man up just to punch him in the face as hard as I could. Someone called the police, and they arrived as his daughter was helping him to his car. He gave some false story about how I was stealing his dog. I told the officer what happened, along with about 20 witnesses, and they said I was free to go. Don't mess with people's dogs. Story 2. Context: this woman has been a problem parent at the center for as long as her 5-year-old child, Molly, has been here. The girl started as an infant in our baby room, so that's 5 years of this woman. This entitled mom is not a good person. She would not pack lunches for her daughter. She would often send her then 13-year-old to bring Molly into the daycare because she didn't want to. And at least 3 times a week, teachers had to give the child a bath in the sink. And when she was too big for that, a sponge bath because she smelled so bad. Yes, we called Child Protective Services, and I'm not sure what came of that, but I know Molly is still in her custody. It was awful, but there was one saving grace this girl could look to: Jenny. Jenny was the sweetest woman you would ever meet. She worked in one of the preschool classrooms, but her heart was so big and open that she extended her kindness to all children. Every time Molly came in without lunch, Jenny would make sure she had food, even if it meant driving to the local Walmart or country fair to get her a sandwich. Eventually, Jenny began to bring in food personally for Molly, because Molly's entitled mom never packed her lunch. Jenny died suddenly and unexpectedly in 2019. She was young, just barely over 30. Entitled mom kept bringing Molly in without lunches, and up until the global health crisis hit. It was an ongoing battle that finally came to a head yesterday. Molly came in at 10:30 yesterday, which was too late for breakfast. In the preschool classrooms, we keep them on a schedule, and breakfast ends at 8:30, while they get snacks at 10 o'clock. Molly had a snack, and lunch started at noon. When the teacher opened her lunchbox to prepare her food at lunch, she noticed there was breakfast in there. She decided, politely, to remind Molly's mother that breakfast ends at 8:30, and if she was planning to bring her in later, to please have her eat before she comes in. Because things are already in full swing in the classroom, this was done via a childcare app that we use to communicate with parents. Well, entitled mom did not like that and called the center screaming at our assistant director ad. This lasted for 10 minutes, and the pregnant ad came into my room, the infant room, angry about all this. She cooled down and went back to her office. The offices are right next to my room, so I was being somewhat nosy and listening in. Entitled mom came to pick Molly up, effectively pulling her from the center. There, she got a shouting at the ad. Wouldn't you be upset if they weren't feeding your baby? Wouldn't you want justice and people held accountable? That's when the director D stepped in and told the ad to check on the other classrooms. Translation: you don't have to listen to this nonsense. I'll handle it. Director then followed up with, personally, I would make sure that my child ate breakfast before bringing her in. Ad left at that point. Entitled mom was throwing a fit about how she didn't like the teachers here, how she thought Chana, the preschool teacher for the 4-5-year-olds, was a raging jerk, and how she didn't like her since the beginning, and how a lot of parents pulled their kids because of her. Thing is, she was confusing Tiana with Tessa, the younger preschool teacher for the 3-4-year-olds. Tessa is, admittedly, a strict woman, but her strictness was countered with kindness and positive reinforcement. Entitled mom is so out of touch with her daughter's providers that she never even got to meet Tiana. Finally, she delivered the zinger everyone knew was coming, but hoped she had enough class to refrain from saying, "You stopped doing the food program when Jenny died. I think you are just too selfish and cheap to honor her memory in continuing it." To which the director finally stood up and said, Jenny was the food program. She bought that food for Molly out of her own pocket with her money that she earned caring for the children here. The reason this so-called food program stopped was because Jenny died. To which entitled mom doubled down and said, well, why wouldn't you continue to buy food for the children in her honor? Director: because we do not have the budget to allocate funds for a food program, and in addition, in our handbook, it states we are only to provide snacks. We would need a whole other set of clearances and regulations to start serving food here like a cafeteria. Entitled mom: but you did it when Jenny was here. The argument continued back and forth like that until finally, director basically said that this was the second outburst that entitled mom had, and that they could no longer accept Molly at the center with this continued behavior. Entitled mom, needing to get the last word in, finished with, fine. I don't want to send my child to a place that starves her. Then she left with Molly. My heart breaks for the child, but there's not much else to do. I just can't believe how classless you have to be, in one argument, to bring up a beloved, saintly person like Jenny and then basically insinuate that our wonderful ad was going to be a bad mother, while acting like we are still somehow the bad guys for canceling our non-existent food program. Story 3. This happened several years ago, and to date is the most abrasive interaction I have had with other folks in public regarding my service dog who is now retired. I was maybe about 21 at the time and was in the beginning stages of really learning to be an adult on my own. I had just moved out of my parents' house and into an apartment with a friend. Before this, I still lived at home with my parents and usually just went to school, work, and didn't often go places alone because I'm kind of a homebody. So between school, work, and the odd outing with my parents or friends, everyone usually around me was really respectful and familiar with my service dog and my general rules about her. I didn't have issues usually, and if I did, someone less anxious and more assertive was usually there to help me. This was no longer the case after I moved out. I was out and about running some errands on my own, which I was beginning to enjoy doing, with my service dog at my side. Along the way, I realized I hadn't eaten in a while and decided to stop at the food court of the mall I was in right then for something quick and tasty. I got my food, found a seat, and began to get my service dog focused and prepared to go through our usual process so I could get started on my meal. I'm not secretive or anything personally, and usually, I'm down to discuss my dog and educate if I have the time or energy with someone who is polite and well-meaning. I have a really intense food allergy, so that's what she is for. She also knows how to bring me a handful of objects on command like an epinephrine auto-injector, inhaler, or just lay down next to me to give me access to meds carried on her harness. It's really important that she not be disturbed while I have her check things because a missed alert can be life or death for me, not to be dramatic or anything. Breathing tends to be important. So I'm about to go through the process of having my dog do a check for me when I see a child making a beeline for my service dog. She is harnessed, clearly and boldly marked, and not facing this little girl. That doesn't matter though because the child is clearly too young or excited to read. Entitled kid, puppy. I placed a hand out instinctively just in time to keep her from touching my dog, who is still set to do her check thankfully. I try to be understanding with kids, but I have a few hard and fast rules. I never reward attempts to touch without asking. I will stop and thank polite children, though each situation usually gets a conversation from me about how important working dogs are. However, even with polite children, I do not stop my dog mid-task for my own safety. Me. Oh no, honey. Please don't touch the puppy. She has a really important job, and she is working right now. This is usually a good enough explanation for most children about 2 and up. Not this one though, because she immediately starts crying. I am talking full-on pouring tears and a red face as she screamed loudly in the busy food court. I looked around for a parent and locked eyes with a round, blonde woman who was apparently staring icy daggers at me. Entitled Mom. Why are you touching my child? Entitled Kid. Puppy. I want the puppy. Entitled Mom marches over to me from her table and demands that I just let her child pet my dog. I could feel the heat on my neck. I was so embarrassed at all the staring faces. Me. I'm sorry, I really can't do that. This is my service dog, and she's working right now. If I let her get distracted during her task, I can get really sick or even worse. Entitled Mom. Service dogs are for disabled people. You obviously aren't blind, and you don't look sick. Me. Thanks. That means she's doing a good job. Entitled Mom. What's wrong with you then? Just let her pet the dog. The child is carrying on incoherently during this exchange and has now thrown herself on the floor. My service dog is not engaging her but is fond of children, so she is looking at her with concern. I get more irritated because I will have to wait longer to eat now. Me. That's none of your business. Nobody is petting the dog. Can you please leave me alone? Your kid shouldn't be running at large dogs she doesn't know anyway. Entitled Mom. I bet you're just faking it. I don't think pit bulls can even be service dogs. Me. Any breed can be a service dog, lady. Please go away and take your daughter with you. Entitled Mom looks like I just slapped her in the face. She could tell I wasn't going to budge. She picked up the small screaming child, walked back to her table, and put her in a stroller. She gathered her stuff and left. I breathed a sigh of relief and decided to check my phone for a minute so my service dog could forget the ordeal and reset. I figured it was behind me, and I could go back to what I was doing. Oh, how wrong I was. Just a few minutes later, I could hear the screech of an entitled mom heading back into battle. The child was still crying, and this time she was accompanied by a security officer. Entitled Mom. There, that animal bit my baby. My eyes probably looked like they were going to fall out of my head. I knew people had weird hang-ups about breeds, but this lady had just been demanding her kid be allowed to pet my dog. I couldn't believe it. This particular security guard looked like he didn't want to be mediating between adults at all. He asked me if it was true, and I, of course, said it wasn't. I told him that the child had run up to my dog and the mother was mad I wouldn't let my dog be pet. He asked if she was a service dog. I confirmed she was. He asked if she was trained to do a task to mitigate a disability. I confirmed she was. Entitled Mom. She's lying. That mutt bit my daughter and made her cry. Entitled Kid. Puppy. The child is visibly reaching for the dog. The security guard is clearly having none of her nonsense at this point. My service dog is calmly sitting next to us during the whole ordeal, watching me. She doesn't exactly look vicious and is actually quite a sissy. At this point, a nice girl around my own age chimes in. Girl. This lady and her kid were bothering Op. That child was never bitten. You have cameras, right? The security guard confirms there are indeed cameras and says we will all need to follow him so he can check the footage due to the severity of the accusation. Security guard. Either I have to call animal control or the police. Harassing a service dog is a felony, and a dog biting a child is a pretty big deal. Either way, someone is in trouble. Entitled Mom looks panicked and starts to backpedal and says she's willing to drop it and everyone can go their own way. Her precious baby is fine after all. Me. I'm not willing to drop it. You lied about me. Let's go. 3 more security guards show up, and we all get escorted to the security office. Sure enough, the footage shows that the kid never even got within arm's reach of my dog, an entitled mom was harassing us. They ask me if I want to press charges, and I say that I do. Police show up within a few minutes, and I happen to know one of the officers because he's my ex-boyfriend's dad. We split amicably before we graduated high school. He knows me. He knows my dog. He loves my dog and has said she's one of the best trained dogs he's ever met. I usually wouldn't be petty, but I excitedly greet him. He smiles and asks if it's okay to pet my service dog at the moment. I thank him for asking permission and say, of course. Entitled mom looked like she could just throw something. The other officer takes my statement. In the end, the officers see the footage. Entitled mom gets arrested and extra charges thrown on for resisting arrest and assaulting an officer. It was pretty wild, and my first real experience with entitled people on my own. The charge for harassing my service dog ended up getting dropped, but the other 2 charges stuck. I didn't care too much about that, but hopefully she learned a lesson. I also did eventually get to eat